Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 2. Let's practice our whip stitch. For this lesson, you're going to need the following materials: a ruler that has millimeter markings, 2 pieces of your scrap felt, some of your embroidery yarn. Use a scrap piece, don't use what's in the kit. I think you should have enough, but just to make sure, just use something else. Regular thread, anything will work. And a nice embroidery needle, pointy, with some thread already in, and this is a double strand of thread that I'm going to use to get started. So the whip stitch on felt, there are 2 things that you need to remember to make this a successful stitch on for your bear. The first one is that the stitches need to be perpendicular or at a right angle to the edge of your fabric. They also need to be consistent in length and stitch width apart. So the instructions recommend that you do between a 1.5 to 2 millimeter stitch length. So my trick, because I have trouble keeping my stitches consistent even after all this time and all my creatures and stitching I've done. So what I do is I just take my fingernail and a Sharpie marker, and I do 2 little lines about 2 millimeters apart. And this will help me when I go along stitching so that I can remember about how far apart I should be doing this. Now, I'm a left-handed person, and I find that for me, doing the whip stitch, I have better success if I stitch towards myself. In the instructions, she says to stitch away from, but it really depends on what method works best for you. I find that the stitches are more consistent and they look better when they are stitched towards me, but practice whichever way you like and you'll develop your own method. Now to start the stitching, I'm going to take my thread, no knot, and I'm going to just sort of slip it in between the layers of the felt up to the edge. And you can see the needle's coming through here. I'm going to pull it through, leave a bit of a tail. You can't see it on either side of the fabric. So I'm going to make a tacking stitch there. And when I pull my little loops through on all my stitches, I'll try to make sure that the loop is straight up and down at a right angle towards the edge of the fabric. Pull it tight. I'll do one more. This method of burying the thread and not without a knot works great, especially when you're adding items to the outside of your bear like ears, tails, noses, things like that. When you do the bear when you do put the bear together, you can actually just do a knot and bury that inside. So now I'm going to start my whip stitch. Got my 2 pieces of fabric right up against each other, and I'm going to start one here, about 2 millimeters apart. Now when I pull this through, my needle through, I'm going to make sure that that little loop on the outside here is nice and perpendicular before I pull it snug, like that. Beautiful little stitch. Now I'm going to keep going here. And every stitch I do, I'm going to make sure that that little loop is perpendicular and my stitches are all even, about 2 millimeters. I still have trouble with inconsistency with my stitch length. Don't worry about it. As long as your stitches are perpendicular, that's the most important thing to keep in mind, and that they're fairly close together. If one's a little further apart, it won't matter. It's all aesthetics. And my bears look cute even with a couple of wacky stitches in there, no problem. So I'll keep going here. I've got about 1 inch done. Once you get the rhythm, it doesn't take too long to do these little guys. Now, to finish my stitch, finish my thread, I'm going to make a loop, go inside, and just pull tight. And you can take your thread and needle and thread it kind of through the stitches you just put in between the two pieces of felt, and pull that and cut it off like that. Now here's the magic. Look at how strong that seam is on felt. Like, I'm pulling that real hard. Nothing's happening. Bit loose. I probably should have made a little tighter there or closer together, but you know, when you stuff the bear, this will still hold. You won't have any problems. All right. Well, go and practice your whip stitch, and I'll be back in a bit here with video number 3. We are going to look at our bare bones, playing with the pipe cleaners and getting our legs and arms all ready to go.